Hello, and welcome to Regional Roundtable. My name is Will Stewart. I'm the president of the Greater Derry Londonderry Chamber of Commerce and your host. Regional Roundtable is a program of the Chamber aimed at discussing issues of regional impact to the Greater Derry Londonderry region. Today we're discussing the Granite State Rail Trail and its impact on the towns in our region, and specifically the towns of Derry, Londonderry, and Windham through which the trail passes. Our guests today, welcome gentlemen, are Bob Rimol of Londonderry Trailways, Mark Connors of the Derry Rail Trail Alliance, and Mark Samsel of the Windham Rail Trail Alliance.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Perhaps we can jump right in and can we get a little overview of the trail itself? What is the Granite State Rail Trail?
Mark, you want to start? You've kind of started this off, so.
I wasn't prepared for that question, but I'll be more than happy to jump in. The Granite State, well, from the beginning, the Granite State Rail Trail came from the development of the Windham, Derry, and Londonderry trails, as well as you go farther north, Manchester, the Northern Rail Trail, and up to Lebanon. It basically took those trails in concert and created the Granite State. We felt that we needed a name, a recognition, a place that identified this tremendous asset that we have currently and that we're building, and have a name, and appropriately, Granite State Rail Trail.
So how long from the Mass border to the Vermont border are we talking?
Good question.
It's going to be about 158 miles, I believe, was the number that is being bantered about, but depends on which kind of twists and turns it may have to take through some of the different areas that are yet to be completed.
So, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, and the concept of the rail trail in the Granite State is that it will be paved from the Salem-Mass border up to Concord, and then north of Concord it will remain as an unpaved trail because it's not as many people use it up there, and it's also a four-season trail, especially north of Concord, used for snowmobiling as well.
Right.
Sure. Well, going kind of south from north through our region, maybe Mark, we can start with you, and maybe you could each tell us about your respective towns' section of trail.
Mm-hmm. Sure. We started back in 2004, the Windham Rail Trail Alliance. The actual initial stage of construction started in 2006, and that was a base coat for 3.5 miles of 4.1 that we have, and then we put a finish coat in about 2006. Currently we have a half mile to go. Quarter of a mile will be funded by the Windham Rail Trail Alliance. The other quarter will be part of a grant that was given to Salem, Windham, and Derry initially. And that will conclude this summer. So we're looking forward to having our 4.1 miles completed this summer.
So that'll extend from the Derry town line to the Salem town line?
Correct. Okay. That is correct. And also in the interim there, we did have a grant that rehabilitated the Windham Depot as well. So that what that included was the infrastructure, structural work in the roof, painting of the historical depot, as well as the freight building, and provided for new parking, a brand new parking lot that accommodates 37 vehicles and 2 handicap slots. And we also moved in a former B&M caboose, the C16, which has taken on recently a national acclaim, I understand. So we're pretty proud of the fact that we have that facility as a trailhead, as a starting point.
Nice. How about the Derry Trail?
Well, and Derry actually goes back a little bit further than Windham in that Derry, a long time ago, after the railbed was discontinued as far as use, there was a group in Derry that built what's known as the Derry Bike Path, which actually is a loop around Derry that encompasses part of the rail trail in the downtown area, but also goes around to a number of the schools, the golf course, and a number of parks and recreation areas. So that was in place already in Derry. But in 2007, after seeing the work that Mark and his team had done down in Windham, Eric Whitney, who's the president of our organization, and myself got together, put our heads together on, how do we complete a link to Windham was really our goal, because there was a sandy track basically of the old rail bed, connecting to what was a beautiful paved trail now. So we worked very hard with a board of directors that, a small group of people got together. We went to the town. The town actually was willing to kick in some funds at that time to match some of the fundraising that we were doing as a nonprofit organization. And we were able to get that in 2 phases, get that section between the existing piece in Derry that ended at about Kendall Pond Road, and get that piece southward to Bowers Road, and then on all the way down to Windham's Trail in the 2nd phase. So over a few years we were able to get that built. And so that's how that kind of started the Derry Rail Trail Alliance. And then we are looking now at moving, going forward up through and connecting to Londonderry, hopefully in the near future. But there's some challenges there as well that we're addressing, working with Londonderry Trailways.
Yeah. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard that the section of Derry and Windham's Trail combined is the longest section of paved bike trail in the state. Is that true?
In an abandoned rail corridor, that is true.
Okay.
That is true. And I would also add probably privately funded as well. Mm. It was not done through grants. It was either through town, some town input, as well as, I know in Windham it was privately built.
All right. So what do things look like in Londonderry, Bob?
Well, Londonderry, we have 6 miles, which is a little bit more than some of the other towns around us. Londonderry Trailways actually began in 1999 as a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we basically have 3 facets of Londonderry Trailways. We have the Musquash Conservation Area, we have trails around town, and then we have the Rail Trail Group. And the Rail Trail Group became active in about 2010, seeing what Salem, Windham, Derry, Manchester were doing. We knew we were the missing piece, and we were fortunate to be able to pass a town warrant article in 2012 and pave our, 2013, and pave our first rail trail that year, our first mile of rail trail. But we have a lot of interesting areas that we go through that it's really a multi-transportation area with not just the rail trail, but we actually go through the Exit 5 Park and Ride. We go through the Manchester Airport, and we're making great progress. So
people could conceivably use it to commute?
Yeah, technically, you could ride your bike or walk to the Exit 5 Park and Ride, jump on a bus, go down to Boston, hop on a plane at Logan Airport, and go across country, without getting into a car.
Yeah. I think that's an important piece of the puzzle too, is that, as Mark said, a lot of this grew out of, part of it grew out of the Interstate 93 widening, where there was an original study done back in the 90s for an alternative transportation corridor, and there was a study done, and this was outlined as a potential alternative transportation corridor for pedestrian and bicycle traffic and things. And with the transportation center that Bob mentioned in Londonderry and the one by Exit 2 are all fairly close to, through the existing rail trail. And in fact, the rail trail in Londonderry runs right through the parking lot, so it's perfect. So I think that's an important piece, is that it's not just a recreational trail necessarily, although a lot of people talk about it that way. It truly is an alternative transportation mode as well.
So who uses the trail then in your respective towns, and I imagine across town lines, of course?
Everyone. You have young children learning how to ride a bike. You have senior citizens. Aside from the obvious, you have people with disabilities, which is a wonderful thing about a paved rail trail. It's rollerblading, running, biking, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing. Mm-hmm. You can name other uses of it, but it truly is a multi-use greenway.
Yeah. And a 4-season one, it sounds like.
4-season, absolutely.
It is. Yeah, and I mean, being out on the trail, as Bob says, I've seen a wide variety of users. A few that he didn't mention, obviously, lots of dog walkers out there. I've seen horses, people on horseback riding on the trail. Snowmobiles in the winter on certain sections where that is allowed. In downtown Derry, there's a section that's not allowed at this point, but on certain parts of the corridor, the Derry Pathfinders Snowmobile Club maintains it during the winter, so it can be used during the winter as well. So lots of different uses out there.
Mm-hmm.
So there are people who never use it, who have never used it. What's the benefit of having such a trail in our region? Even if you don't use it, would you say what do other people get out of it?
Well, what I see, and Bob picked up on that, is the families. I think over the years, I grew up. I've been in Windham now for 35 years, and when we moved there and my kids grew up, it was basically a dirt path, and it was not a place that was conducive to bringing young kids. And what you see today are families. You see families. You see 3-4 generations of folks sharing the trail. Spoke to people that have their relatives, their parents traveling in from different parts of the country, and they're there to see the grandchildren and the children, and they're out there. We've had recent counts of 1,100, and on 2 days, on a Saturday and Sunday this past summer, and those were slow days actually, but it was just tremendous to see all those folks out there, and we, again, with the time we've spent in town, and I've volunteered in softball and in different leagues, I see people I haven't connected with in years. And it's amazing what you see out there and who you see.
I think one of the biggest benefits also is a health benefit, and it's interesting that a lot of the donors have picked up on that early on. In fact, Parkland Medical Center, a number of the medical professionals in the Derry and Greater Derry area were early sponsors and supporters of the trail because of the health aspect. And with some of the issues that we have with obesity in kids and things these days, they were really behind that. And I've actually met a gentleman who rides his bike on the trail every day that he can when it's not snow covered, who actually was recovering from a heart attack, and this was like the first time he was out there starting to do some rehab and things on the trail. So there's a health benefit. There's a lot of different great aspects to it: the family, the health, just getting out and seeing some nature. I mean, can't imagine how many people have said to me that they never knew there was such a beautiful area in Derry as the Bowers Road wetlands area that's there and going down towards Windham. So getting people out in that nature, to see some of the stuff. There's blue herons down there, there's turtles, there's everything for the kids to see when you're out there. It's great.
Mm-hmm. We have 2 occupational organizations that bring wheelchaired individuals to the trail on a regular basis in the summer. But again, I know one does travel about 60 miles to use the trail, which again, it's something that you never would have thought that would be happening. We also host 2 running races. The Windham the 5K, it's a certified race. We've had 450 runners last year. It's our 8th year coming up. As well, a 10K in the fall. Convenient MD sponsors a 10K, which for the 2nd year in a row will be one of the New Hampshire Grand Prix circuit races. So we're, again, pleased with the amount of use that we see, and of course the folks that are connecting through from Derry, some from the south on the Ralston Road end, but folks who are using that trail.
The interesting thing too is if you never ever use the rail trail, there are also economic benefits to the people that either have a business near the rail trail or live near the rail trail. It's statistically proven that home values go up. Business becomes more vibrant. Even if you don't have a retail business and you have more of a commercial, industrial type business, your employees can go out and use it during their lunch hour or before after work. So there are a lot of intangible benefits to the entire community.
One we've seen here in downtown Derry. We've just talking about before the show, Bob. You were at the Granite Rail Trail Cafe, which opened up. If you talk to the owners, Melanie and Carmel, they'll tell you. It's in the name, Rail Trail Cafe. They opened up, simply because that trail was there and the traffic it brings in. And I'm a bicyclist myself, and love to see kind of bicycle-related economic development. And I asked them one time. I said, where do people actually come in off the trail? Yes, they'll come in, carrying their helmets and put their bike right outside, come in, order a coffee, and she said some people are coming a lot of people are coming from Massachusetts, she said some people are even coming as far away as Connecticut and Rhode Island, just to ride on the trail.
Right, and I think that's a great point, is that right now, a lot of studies will show right now with the 8.5, 9 miles of direct straight pavement that we have between Windham and Derry being, the longest stretch in the state, that's great. But when you look nationwide at the trails, the longer trails are actually becoming economic engines, as Bob said, not only for the local economy, but from the tourism aspect, in that there is a great segment of people who do go and travel to go and ride on rail trails, and they spend, go from inn to inn or from business to business along the trail. And I think with what we have as the potential right now in New Hampshire with the Granite State Rail Trail being that the northern rail trail section that Bob mentioned earlier was just completed in October, and it's 58 miles already. It's crushed stone, it's hard pack, it can be ridden with most bikes other than a high expensive street bike, but you can ride it from the Vermont border all the way down well into New Hampshire. And then there's a few pieces that are missing, but once we put that whole puzzle together, I think we're going to see some really great economic benefits to the whole state of New Hampshire, and then we'll start drawing in that tourism aspect of bicycle tourism that right now I think it is mostly a local or a regional trail. Like you say, we're bringing in some folks from Mass and things now to ride the trail, but once we get that critical mass of having maybe 30, 40, 50 miles connected, I think we're going to see a lot more, and when it's 150 miles, then we're really going to be reaping the benefits.
And what has changed over the last 10 years? And 10 years is, if you look at the life cycle of a grant, 10 years is a short period of time to see what has been accomplished so far. Getting involved with these organizations early on, it was difficult because we were selling a vision. We didn't quite have what I would say asphalt. We didn't have, even from the hard pack up in the northern, we didn't have much. I believe there's a half mile in Manchester. What the state needs to recognize, and I know Bob and I are working on this issue right now, is that yes, we had a vision, we've transformed into a story. And as Mark said, there are folks traveling from Massachusetts, which has a great wealth of trails. Why would anyone from Massachusetts want to come up here? You got the Norwottuck, you've got the Cape Cod, but they are coming up here. So we have a story now to tell, and it's venues like this that allows us to do that. It needs to be picked up, and it needs to be capitalized on. And for us, the work going on in Salem and Derry and North and Londonderry to Manchester, I think that puts us even more on the national map.
And I think, with looking at the trail that we have, Bob touched on it earlier. I mean, their trail goes through the airport, but also it actually touches the old railbed touches the Aeronautical Museum that's at the airport as well, so the Aviation History Museum. There's a lot of real kind of neat things happening along this segment of the corridor that I think will be attractive from a tourism standpoint once it's all in place. And to Mark's point, I think a lot of nonprofits, a lot of volunteer work, some local money from the local towns and conservation commissions has kind of got us this far. And it's really at the critical point now where we're trying to work, I think, in Concord and get people to understand the vision, because we have a lot of different, non-connected pieces now where there's some tricky sections now that are going to need some funding in order to actually make this happen. And it really is at the point, I think, where the state needs to perhaps, step in and get a little bit more involved in making that happen. And you see that across the country, Pennsylvania, Florida, Michigan, some of these places that have these much larger trails. It has been, heavily funded by, the state and the Department of Transportations, and those states have gotten involved. So we're hoping to get to that point, I think, fairly soon here in New Hampshire. We'll see.
Well, I think, an important point to keep in mind when we talk to policymakers and others at the Department of Transportation, is that, this is infrastructure. Just like roads, bridges, sidewalks, airports, what have you. This is infrastructure too, and bicycle infrastructure is infrastructure. And you're right, it has the potential already to show a return on investment, through the increased property values, which you mentioned, Bob, and other economic development, and even just people, it's creating jobs, obviously, at the Rail Trail Cafe. But even people, if they're driving up from Massachusetts, they're probably stopping not just to get a cup of coffee, but maybe fill up their gas tank before going home, or grabbing a meal at Sabatino's or something like that. And I've even heard stories of people popping in. They might be going up north for a week to in the summer, to go to the lakes or the mountains or even the seacoast, and then it's right off 93. You can easily hop on, hop off. So just pop on, ride a few miles, and go back down. So I think that's it's a good story to tell, and one that the Chamber is certainly looking forward to getting involved in and being a proponent for. Because you're right, it is good for our region from tourism and a number of other perspectives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a synergistic effect. I mean, we're all grassroots organizations putting this rail trail together. Hopefully the state will begin to step up a little bit more. I know that they are recognizing the value of what we're doing, but just like you said, it's the whole package. It's the health, it's the family, it's the tourism. It's just a better lifestyle. I mean, just like Mark said, it's the wave is getting bigger all over the entire country, and now is the time to jump on it and go for the ride.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully policymakers will see the benefit. I mean, it's kind of been gone about, it sounds to me, kind of in true New Hampshire fashion, which is to say, starting off kind of in the private sector and individuals and businesses, a lot more so than most local or certainly state governments. But it sounds to me like the private sector has done its job, and you've really gotten things off the ground. And if we want to have a public-private partnership, they'll need to step up.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you mentioned, the private-public partnership, I think, is key. And I know in all three of our towns, I think that's worked very well, especially here in Derry. We have a great relationship with the town's DPW department. We have some maintenance agreements in place as to who's responsible for which pieces of the upkeep of the trail and that sort of thing. And, we couldn't have done this without the support of the town and the town's DPW department and planning department. So it really has been a great partnership here in Derry, and we hope to continue that. I know both our planning director and our head of DPW are working very closely with the section that we need to in order to connect to Londonderry, because that does involve the area where exit 4A will be coming in, as well as some private property for some development that's going on in Londonderry. So those folks who are at those tables, at those state level meetings, from the town, are definitely keeping this in mind and trying to help further that cause too. And I believe the folks in Londonderry and Windham also. I know Mark's been very involved at that level too. So.
Yeah, in the town of Londonderry, we've also been very fortunate, a very supportive town council, and the entire staff who works for Londonderry, from the town manager, Kevin Smith, on down through the DPW, the planning board. Everybody is just enthusiastic. They will bend over backwards to help you and do whatever it takes to get the job done. So. Kudos to everyone that supports the rail trail.
Well, that's great to hear, and I think that most towns, I would imagine, see it in kind of enlightened self-interest to realize kind of what's good for the rail trail is good for their particular towns on a number of levels, like you said, from property taxes to lower healthcare costs, and of course those tourism dollars that can come in. I mean, we've seen, you mentioned the Cape Cod Trail, which is definitely a tourism driver on the Cape, and you go up to Stowe, Vermont, and their recreation path is a big draw. So if we could have something like that here, it's a win-win for everybody, whether you use the trail or not. But Mark, going back to what you mentioned about connecting Derry to Londonderry, it really sounds to me like that's kind of the next big hurdle faced by the trail, particularly with regard to 4A and the area kind of going up to the airport. Can all of you kind of talk a little bit about kind of what the challenges are and what's the timeline going forward?
Yeah, I'd be happy to lead off. I think there's a couple things that are really great right now. Windham, as Mark mentioned, is just about to finish their section in their town, and Salem, which is the piece that's kind of missing between Windham and Methuen, which we should also mention. This trail does continue on down into Massachusetts already. So Methuen has completed their trail down into the Spigot River Greenway, and there's some beautiful stuff down there too. So that stuff is kind of happening, and it's kind of on the glide plane, if you will, and it's working. The piece where we come up through Derry now, we come into the downtown, which is great because we're right in the middle, and the Derry downtown, I think, has a real opportunity to benefit economically.
Certainly.
The new road that was built by the courthouse completed the trail over to Hood Park, which was nice. And now from there, we have a short section across the dam over to North High Street that needs to be looked at, and that is town-owned property. But from there north, the rail bed itself was actually sold to a private entity back in the 80s, early 90s. So between us, we have a little bit of a private ownership of the rail trail. In addition, Exit 4A is currently slated to come in at North High Street and Madden Street, which is going to be a fairly large intersection once they're done based on the current plans. So the trail also crosses the road at kind of a 45-degree angle on a curve, which is a little bit dangerous if we were just to run the trail. So there's a lot of engineering that needs to be looked at there. So that's one of the key pieces that really is holding us up from, we have about 0.6 miles left to get from where we are now to the Londonderry town line, which is in the middle of the woods up there. What used to be Old Coatville Road, I guess, up for those who are in Derry, it's up behind kind of where the sports zone and the old wood products place is up in the woods up there. There's kind of where the town line ends, and then it goes on from there to Route 28. So that section is the challenge, and we've been waiting a long time for the 4A thing to kind of resolve itself. Seems like it's getting there now, and we're hopeful that this piece of the puzzle will fall into place, fairly soon.
Yeah, in Londonderry, this year we will complete Phase 2, which will add another 3/4 mile section of the rail trail paved. We were actually supposed to finish it in November, but the weather stopped us from paving. But the new section will run from the Exit 5 park and ride down to the Irving gas station. Okay. In 2016, we will add another 1.4 mile stretch, and then again we will get very close to the Londonderry-Derry border. And we will also have 0.6 of a mile to go, and that will definitely be the missing link. And I think our timing is pretty good. Within 2 or 3 years, we will definitely know the status of Exit 4A, the plans, et cetera, et cetera. But regardless of that, we're going to press on, not just go south, but we are also going to head north towards the airport as well. So we have a very aggressive plan to keep the paving and the phases going.
And I think it's important for folks who are watching this, as you said, some folks are aware of the rail trail, some aren't, but I think it's important to note that the trail can be ridden on a mountain bike at this point from Methuen all the way up to basically up to the airport if you're a little bit intrepid. Now some of those sections aren't great, but it can be done. There are some dangerous road crossings, so technically the trail is closed, but you could actually make the trek on a mountain bike. I've done it myself, and there's some beautiful areas there, but it's going to be so much nicer when it's paved.
I also like to add too, Windham, we won't be starting or stopping at our 4.1. We did get approval by DOT to have a culvert placed underneath the widening of 93 as part of that project. So we'll be connecting our trail to an east-west, the old Worcester Natural Portland line.
Just around Exit 3?
No, actually it's from our depot.
Oh, okay.
It's from our depot. That'll go under 93, it'll head west to 111, and that's approximately 3 miles, I believe. So we'll be pursuing a connection there. Not part of this rail bed, but part of the old abandoned Worcester Nashua. So that you'll see things happening along that spur over the next 3 years.
And that's kind of a neat little piece of history that even being involved in the rail trail I wasn't aware of until Mark and his folks pointed out, is that I don't know if a lot of folks realize, but at Windham Depot there were actually trains running north, south, and east, west. So what Mark's talking about there, the depot is actually a conjunction of multiple rails there. So it's going to be really neat to be able to come to Windham and actually then travel east or west, because you can go eastbound on the Rockingham Recreational Trail. Again, it's not a paved trail, but it is used for mountain biking and other things. In that case, they have some ATV access and things, on that trail further east of Route 28. But it really is starting to put a whole network of trails in place as we get these connections made.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's where the value is, I think, in those networks and being able to make those connections, whether it's roads or trails. We mentioned the viewers. What can viewers do to help out, to help your organizations, to help these projects be completed in all of our towns?
Cash, checks, money orders.
Donations always accepted.
Connections. But we're always looking for volunteers, both at board level as well, the work that we do. I know on our trail particularly, We spend, the Windham Rail Trail Alliance spends about, we're hitting just about 500 hours a year on volunteer maintenance.
Oh, wow.
And we provide, over the last years, we've averaged about 99% of all the maintenance that occurs on that trail. And that's, again, we've had tremendous support from the town. Our administrator, Dave Sullivan, done a great job in helping with grants and pulling a lot of that together for us. But we do, as part of pride, it's almost a hobby for some of us. We provide our own maintenance, and we're always looking for help there.
I think in Derry, what people can do on top of donating, first of all, is just get involved. We have a fairly active Facebook page now. We had a website, but everyone kind of migrated to Facebook. So there's a Derry Rail Trail Facebook page, and I know Windham and Londonderry are also connected to us, as are many of the rail trails on our page. So if you're just learning about the rail trail, get on there, and there's maps and pictures and things that you can check out to kind of see that. There is an option to make some donations. Donations are always wonderful. We do have some sponsorship opportunities for businesses on the trail right now. We have the Granite Rail Trail Cafe that you mentioned, Windham Junction Country Store, and a couple of others have stepped up to make some donations. Actually, one of our town councilors, Josh Borden, recently also became a trail sponsor, so you get a sign on the trail that you're sponsoring a certain section of the trail for an annual maintenance type fee. So there's a lot of opportunities to get involved. I can't list them all. I wish I could, but as Mark mentioned, the maintenance on the trail here in Derry is done through the board, but we're only 6 or 7 people. So what we do is involve a lot of community groups in helping us. And we've had countless Boy Scout and Girl Scouts and Cub Scout troops out on the trail doing trash cleanups and different things like that in the spring. The Derry Moms Club, just a number of different groups. Pinkerton Academy has had several student groups come out and paint the railings on the fences and do different things for us. So it's really becoming kind of a community focal point as well, which is nice, and that's really what I think it should be. So lots of ways to get involved. Best way is to send us a message on our Facebook page or send us an email if you're interested. We'll get you any information you need. But donations, money's also always a big part of making us successful in being able to finish this section to Londonderry when the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, I mean, to concur with Mark and Mark, again, donations are very important. We receive donations from individuals. We also receive many donations from businesses, both in town and out of town. We've had a few nice donations to really help the backbone of the organization and the trail, such as Berkshire Hathaway, Varani Realty, Londonderry Family Practice. They've been some important anchors for Phase 2. The other way people can really help is if we do have a vote on a warrant article is to go out and support it. Tell your friends, tell everyone who votes in town to support the rail trail, because we were very fortunate with the first warrant article a couple of years ago. It passed by only 100 votes, but we didn't have anything at that time, and word got around and we got the voters out, they passed it, and now we have something to show people, and now they get it. It's an aha moment. And that's
much more tangible now.
That support is really needed, just to spread the word, go out and vote for the warrant articles if and when they come up.
Anything on the ballot this year on any of your towns?
No. Windham does. We do have a warrant article to cover a percentage of a grant that we applied for. Okay. We're in the waiting list for that grant, but we are still pursuing the match, simply because we believe that we could be in position that the waiting list gets tapped.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And I would say just use it. The more users we have, the more support we'll have, the more people will love it. Yeah. It's just basic. Yeah.
Also, if I can just, on a serious note, we are very appreciative to the organizations that help us out in the multitude of businesses. And for us, the 9 Eagle Scout projects that we have on the trail. But on a serious note, I challenge, and Bob mentioned some larger entities, I challenge bigger businesses, I challenge the hospitals, I challenge the healthcare providers to seriously help these trails. We are providing the opportunity for rehabilitation. It just makes sense that these healthcare providers, and we're talking serious money, and if I can be quoted, more than $100 or $200, I'd like to challenge them to step forward. And perhaps through the Londonderry Dairy Chamber, that word can be spread. But it's a serious situation where the state will not, they don't have the funds, let's be honest, to really help pursue these and see them to completion. We have legislation now that's looking at maintenance and liability that is borne by the towns and organizations like ours. But if a large company or two, healthcare provider, we'd love to get your name out there on our Facebook pages, on our web pages, on our race. You name it, there's opportunity.
Well, great. Well, gentlemen, I think I've asked all the questions that I meant to ask. Is there anything we're leaving out or that you would like to mention before we wrap up today?
The only thing I'd say, Bob just mentioned it, get out there, use the trail, experience it, and if you see anything that needs to be done out there, let us know. You are the eyes and ears on the trail too, so we've had a great network of just users who let us know if a tree branch is down or something needs taken care of, so we appreciate that, and this is a community resource for everybody, so get out there and use it. It's great.
The only thing I'd like to add is that the Manchester to Lawrence line was constructed in the late 1840s by a lot of hard-working individuals, and it was just it's such a historical corridor as well as a recreational corridor that we have to remember that we are preserving history and we're enhancing it with bringing more people onto a corridor that that was littered with trash, it was mud, it was overgrown with brush, so we are now taking lemons and making lemonade.
Mark, any final thoughts?
No, I think I've said it all, and well, I do appreciate the time and having us here today.
Certainly. Well, this concludes Regional Roundtable. I'd like to thank our guest, Bob Rimol from Londonderry Trailways, Mark Connors from the Derry Rail Trail Alliance, and Mark Samsel from the Windham Rail Trail Alliance. And until next time, we'll see you.